Most gardeners think September means the season is winding down. Pull the tomato cages, rake up the squash vines, call it a year. But for a specific group of vegetables, September isn't the end of anything. It's the exact starting point they need. These are cool season crops, plants that actually perform better once the heat of summer is broken and the days start shortening. Plant them now, across most of the country, and they mature right through October and November, sometimes longer, right when the flavor is at its absolute best, thanks to cooler nights doing work no summer garden ever could. Before we get into the list, one quick note since this channel has viewers across the entire country. Your exact planting window inside September depends heavily on your USDA hardiness zone and your first fall frost date. A cheap soil thermometer, usually $5 or $6 at any garden center, is worth having on hand too, since several crops on this list depend on soil being in a specific temperature range for good germination, and guessing rarely gets it right. If you're in zone 8 or 9, you've got real room to work with. If you're in zone 5 or 6, lean toward the early part of the month and prioritize the faster maturing crops here. 12 vegetables belong in your garden this month. Several of them almost nobody grows at home. Let's get into all of them.
Number 1. Fennel. Fennel confuses a lot of gardeners because the bulb only forms properly in cool weather. Planted in the heat of summer, it almost always bolts before the bulb has a chance to swell, sending up a flower stalk and leaving nothing but tough, stringy stems behind. A September planting in warmer zones or an early September start further north removes that problem, since the plant develops through the last of the warm days and then bulbs up as temperatures drop through October. Sow seeds directly about a quarter-inch deep in loose, fertile soil, since fennel doesn't transplant well once its taproot has started developing. As the bulb begins to swell at the base, mound a little soil up around it to keep it pale and tender rather than tough and fibrous. Most varieties take 65 to 90 days, which puts a full harvest into late November in many regions, so this is best suited to zone 7 and warmer, unless you're planting in the very first days of the month. Florence fennel is the variety most gardeners want for the bulb itself, and a cool-grown one, shaved raw into a salad, tastes noticeably milder and sweeter than anything grown under summer heat. Aphids can cluster on the feathery foliage, and a strong spray of water usually knocks them off before they establish. Harvest once the bulb reaches about 3 inches across, cutting at the base just above the roots.
Number 2. Escarole. Escarole is a broad-leafed relative of endive, and it does something almost no other salad green does. It actually improves with a bit of bitterness that cold weather then softens into something rounder and more complex. Sow seeds directly in loose soil about a quarter-inch deep, and keep the bed consistently moist through germination, which takes about 7 to 10 days in September's cooling soil. Most varieties reach harvest in 60 to 90 days, putting a solid harvest into late October or November depending on your zone. The technique that genuinely improves escarole, blanching, gets skipped by most home gardeners simply because they've never heard of it. About 2 to 3 weeks before harvest, gather the outer leaves up and tie them loosely at the top with twine, blocking light from reaching the center. This produces a pale, tender heart noticeably milder than the outer leaves. Slugs tend to go after the tender inner leaves once cooler, damper fall weather sets in, so check under the outer leaves regularly and clear debris where they hide during the day. A light frost only improves the flavor further, so there's no need to rush harvest the moment cold weather arrives. Letting it sit through a couple frosty nights actually works in your favor here. Number 3. Snow peas. Peas genuinely thrive on both ends of the growing season, and a September planting in most regions produces sweeter pods than a spring planting, since the plant matures as temperatures fall instead of rising into summer heat. Direct sow seeds now, about an inch deep, expecting germination within a week to 10 days in September's still warm soil. Choose a fast-maturing variety here, something in the 55 to 65-day range, since you're racing toward first frost rather than racing rising heat, which matters more the further north you're located. Aphids are the main pest to watch for on tender new growth, and a strong spray of water usually knocks them off before they establish a real problem. Give vining types a trellis to climb, which keeps pods clean and off the ground and makes harvest considerably easier than searching through a tangled pile. Harvest snow peas when pods are flat and you can just see the outline of small peas inside. Both flavor and sweetness improve noticeably after a light frost, so don't rush to pull everything the moment cold weather shows up. Pick often, since consistent harvesting is what keeps the vine actively producing instead of slowing down.
Number 4. Daikon radish. Daikon is a completely different experience from the small spring radish most gardeners already know, a long white root that some varieties grow well over a foot in length, though that's specific to true daikon types like Miyashige or Minawase, rather than shorter, rounder varieties sometimes sold under the same name. Sow seeds directly in deep, loose soil, since daikon needs significantly more depth than a standard radish to develop without forking. Most varieties take 60 days, putting harvest around late October or early November, right when cold has had time to sweeten the root through the same starch-to-sugar conversion that improves carrots and parsnips. Flea beetles can go after young daikon leaves, riddling them with small round holes, and a lightweight row cover for the first couple weeks after sowing solves the problem without needing any spray. Thin seedlings early and generously, since crowding is the fastest way to end up with short, twisted roots instead of the long, straight ones daikon is known for. Harvested fresh in fall, daikon is crisp, mild, and slightly sweet. Excellent raw in salads, quick pickled, or simmered into soups.
Number 5. Napa cabbage. Napa cabbage forms loose, elongated heads instead of the tight, round ones typical of standard cabbage, and it's noticeably faster growing, which makes it a strong fit for a September planting, even in regions with a shorter remaining season. Direct sow or transplant now, giving plants 12 to 18 inches of space, since the heads get surprisingly large as they mature. Most varieties reach harvest in 50 to 80 days, putting even a September start comfortably ahead of first hard frost in most regions. Watch for cabbage worms, small green caterpillars that blend in well with the leaves, checking the undersides regularly and hand-picking them off before they do real damage to a forming head. Napa cabbage is particularly sensitive to inconsistent watering, which can cause heads to split open before they've fully matured, so keep soil evenly moist rather than letting it swing between dry and soaked. Cold weather sweetens the leaves considerably, softening what would otherwise be a slightly peppery bite into something mild and almost delicate. This is the variety behind most traditional kimchi, and a homegrown head gives you a crunch and freshness that store-bought versions rarely match.
Number 6. Mustard greens. This is the vegetable with one of the tightest windows on the entire list, and getting it wrong is a common mistake with fall greens generally. Plant too early while summer heat is still intense and the leaves come out aggressively sharp. Wait too long into fall and there's not enough time left before frost for a real harvest. The sweet spot is the first half of September in most climates, giving the plant just enough lingering warmth to establish before cooling temperatures soften that sharpness into something balanced and genuinely enjoyable. Sow seeds directly, about a 1/4 inch deep, expecting germination within 5 to 7 days. Flea beetles love young mustard seedlings. Tiny holes peppered across the leaves are the giveaway, and a lightweight row cover right after sowing keeps them off without any spray needed. Mustard greens are fast,
reaching harvest in just 30 to 40 days, which means even a planting in the second week of the month still gives you a real crop before most regions see their first hard frost. Harvest young leaves for salads, where the flavor stays mild, or let them grow larger for cooking, where that same sharpness mellows beautifully with heat.
Number 7. Fava beans, also called broad beans. These are one of the most cold-hardy legumes you can grow, and in many regions, a September planting gives you a genuine head start compared to waiting until spring, since fava beans actually prefer cool weather to germinate and grow through their early stages. Sow seeds directly, about 1 to 2 inches deep, in loose, well-draining soil. Germination takes 7 to 14 days, and the plant handles light frost without any protection once it's a few inches tall, making it one of the more forgiving crops for gardeners in cooler zones planting later in the month. In zones 7 and warmer, fall-planted fava beans often overwinter successfully, staying small through the coldest stretch and then growing rapidly again once temperatures rise in late winter, producing pods well ahead of a spring-only planting. In colder zones, treat this as a crop for very early fall, giving plants as much time as possible to establish before a hard freeze sets in. Give plants support once they start growing taller. A simple stake or light trellis keeps top-heavy stems from flopping over once pods begin forming. Aphids are a common visitor to fava beans, particularly clustering near the growing tips, and pinching off the top few inches of the plant once it's flowering both discourages aphids and redirects energy into pod production. Harvest pods once they feel firm and full, and shell them out for the beans inside, which taste noticeably sweeter and more tender than the tougher, starchier beans you get from letting pods mature too long. Fava beans also improve soil fertility as they grow, fixing nitrogen the same way other legumes do, leaving the bed genuinely better for whatever you plant there next.
Number 8. Garden peas, the classic shelling type, distinct from the snow and snap varieties many gardeners already know. September planting works well in milder zones for a genuine fall crop, and pods that mature as temperatures drop tend to taste sweeter than the same variety grown in the rising heat of a spring planting. Sow seeds directly about an inch deep and expect germination within a week to 10 days in September's still workable soil. Choose a fast-maturing variety specifically, something in the 60 to 70-day range, since shelling peas generally need a bit longer than snow or snap types to fill out properly inside the pod. Give vining varieties a trellis or netting to climb, which keeps pods off the ground, improves airflow, and makes harvest considerably easier than searching through a sprawling, tangled patch. Bush varieties need less support, but still benefit from something to lean against once pods start weighing down the stems. Powdery mildew can become an issue as fall nights grow cooler and damper, showing up as a white, dusty coating on the leaves. Good spacing and watering at the soil level rather than overhead go a long way toward preventing it from taking hold. Harvest once pods feel full and firm to the touch, checking regularly, since peas can go from perfectly ripe to starchy and overgrown within just a few days. Picking consistently also signals the plant to keep producing rather than slowing down, so regular harvest through the cooler weeks of fall keeps the vine active for as long as your local frost date allows. Number 9. Asparagus. Unlike almost everything else on this list, asparagus isn't a crop you're planting for this fall's harvest at all. This is a long-term investment, and September is actually a solid window in many regions to get crowns established before winter dormancy sets in. Inches of soil initially, gradually filling in the trench as the plant grows over the following weeks. Space crowns about 12 to 18 inches apart. Since asparagus is a genuinely permanent planting, the same bed can keep producing for 15 to 20 years or more once established, making the initial spacing decision one that's worth getting right from the start. This first fall, the plant is entirely focused on building root structure below ground, so don't expect visible growth or spears this season.
That comes the following spring, and even then, resist harvesting anything substantial in year 1 or 2, letting the plant put its energy into establishing a strong root system instead. Mulch heavily once the ground starts cooling hard, protecting the crown through its first winter while it's still relatively vulnerable. Patience is the entire game with asparagus, but very few crops reward it as generously. A well-established bed can provide a genuinely abundant harvest every single spring for well over a decade with only modest annual maintenance.
Number 10. Rhubarb. Like asparagus, rhubarb is a long-term perennial planting, not a quick fall harvest, and September is a good window in most regions to get crowns into the ground before the coldest part of winter arrives. Plant rhubarb crowns about 2 inches deep, with the visible growth buds facing upward in rich, well-draining soil. Space plants generously, about 3 feet apart, since established rhubarb plants get large, with broad leaves spreading well beyond what a young crown might suggest at planting time. Rhubarb genuinely thrives on cold, requiring a period of winter chill to grow properly the following spring, which makes a fall planting a natural fit rather than a compromise. The plant spends this first fall and winter establishing its root system below ground, and you shouldn't expect a meaningful harvest until at least the second growing season, giving the crown time to build enough strength to support repeated cutting. One critical thing every new rhubarb grower needs to know: the leaves are toxic and should never be eaten. Only the stalks are edible. This isn't a minor caveat. It's worth remembering every single time you harvest. Once established, harvest by pulling stalks firmly from the base rather than cutting them, which encourages the plant to keep producing new growth throughout the season. A mature rhubarb plant, properly cared for, can keep producing reliably for a decade or more, making this early fall planting effort a genuinely long-term investment in the garden.
Number 11. Artichokes. Artichokes have a reputation for being a warm climate crop exclusive to California, but perennial varieties can be grown successfully as annuals or short-lived perennials in a much wider range of zones than most gardeners realize. And fall planting gives certain varieties the cold exposure they actually need to produce well. Plant crowns or well-established transplants now, spacing them generously, about 3 to 4 feet apart, since mature artichoke plants get genuinely large, with broad, silvery leaves spreading well beyond a typical vegetable bed footprint. In zones 7 and warmer, artichokes can often overwinter successfully with a heavy layer of mulch protecting the crown, resuming growth in spring and producing a proper harvest of the edible flower buds by early summer. In colder zones, treat this as an experimental crop unless you're prepared to dig up and store crowns indoors over winter, replanting again in spring. Some varieties actually require a period of cold exposure, called vernalization, to trigger proper bud formation the following season, which is exactly why a fall planting in the right climate can outperform a spring-only approach for certain types. Harvest the following summer once flower buds form, but before they begin to open, cutting with several inches of stem attached. A single, well-established plant can produce multiple buds across a season, and though this is more of a long-term, patience-testing project than most crops on this list, few vegetables offer quite the same reward or quite the same grocery store price tag as a fresh, homegrown artichoke.
Number 12. Bunching onions, sometimes called green onions or Welsh onions, close this list, and they're one of the most reliable, low-maintenance crops you can start in September. Unlike bulbing onions, these never form a large bulb, staying slender and green from top to root, which also means they're far more forgiving about exact planting timing. Sow seeds directly or set out small transplants now, spacing them close together, about 2 inches apart,
since bunching onions are typically harvested young and don't need the wider spacing bulbing varieties require. Germination takes 7 to 14 days, and growth continues steadily through the cooling weeks of fall. Choose a variety specifically labeled hardy or overwintering, such as evergreen white bunching, which genuinely lives up to its name in many regions, surviving straight through winter and providing fresh green onions even under light snow cover in milder climates. These plants ask for very little. Consistent moisture and a reasonably fertile bed are about the extent of their requirements, with almost no pest pressure worth mentioning compared to nearly everything else on this list. Harvest by snipping tops as needed or pulling whole plants once they reach a usable size, typically 60 to 90 days from sowing, though thinner, milder green onions can be harvested earlier if you'd prefer a smaller, more delicate size. In many zones, a single September planting can realistically keep providing fresh green onions clear through winter and into the following spring, making this one of the most consistently useful, lowest-effort crops to close out this list.
12 vegetables, all going into the ground this month. Several of them long-term investments, several ready within weeks, and each one offering something worth adding to a fall garden. Whether you're working with a long, warm fall in Zone 8 or 9, or racing a much shorter window further north, there's something here worth adding to your garden before the season closes for good. Which one of these 12 are you most curious to try first? Drop it in the comments along with your zone. Someone gardening in your exact climate is probably reading right now. Subscribe for more of this every week.